Well, it's a series of firsts for President Bola Tinubu as he signed his first budget after assuming office in June last year. President Tinubu also sent his first New Year message to Nigerians yesterday. The 2024 spending plan of 28.7 trillion naira was signed into law at a brief ceremony shortly after the president returned from Lagos, where he observed his Yuletide break. TVC's Femi Akoni has details.
President Bola Tinubu is excited that the National Assembly gave the budget an expeditious consideration. The National Assembly made an addition of 1.2 trillion naira to the 2024 fiscal document. But President Tinubu is still pleased with it, as it reflects a reduction in deficit and an increase in capital expenditure.
It contains a good increase in the capital side, a reduction in recurrent expenditure, and it brought down the deficit from 6.11% to 3.88%.
The Minister of Budget and National Planning, as well as the Coordinating Minister of the Economy, both say this is an implementable budget that captures the key priorities of the Renewed Hope agenda.
Reducing capital expenditure and reducing recurrent deficit is going to be implemented. And he was very clear with the warning to all ministries, departments, and agencies that everyone will earn his own pay.
Total expenditure is larger than the recurrent expenditure. Over 10 trillion naira is going to be the capital expenditure, whereas the recurrent is just about 8.8 trillion naira.
The President of the Senate and Speaker of the House of Representatives both insist the brand new budget for 2024 is a landmark achievement as it settles the controversial CBN Ways and Means by approving its securitization.
We have already enjoined all our committees to get to work. And the President has also pointed out that he's going to have a monthly report from the ministers and the MBS, and any agency, any head of any agency or any minister found wanting will have to find his way out of his administration.
With the capital component of the 2023 budget to work concurrently with the budget of 2024 up to 31st March 2024. And another landmark achievement we had was also approving the securitization of the Ways and Means, which has effectively brought to an end these controversial means and ways of borrowing money.
The President also signed the Supplementary Appropriation Bill of 2023, which he has extended by 90 days and will work concurrently with the 2024 budget up to March 31. The hopes of Nigerians clings on the budget of Renewed Hope as President Bola Tinubu drives the process of its implementation. Femi Akoni, TVC News, Abuja.
Chief Executive Officer of Cowry Asset, Johnson Chukwu, joins me live from Abia State. Mr. Chukwu, thanks for joining us on the news this hour. You've seen the budget itself and the signing that took place on the first day of the year. Would you say that we have a clear-cut plan as to funding this spending plan?
Well, Nifemi, thank you for having me. Happy New Year to you and to all the viewers. If you look at the budget, the 27.8 trillion naira budget, one would say that the key challenge is the implementation. Of course, for the first time in a long while, the projection is that we're going to spend more on capital project than we're going to spend on recurrent. The projected capital expenditure about 9.9 trillion, while at the recurrent, not the recurrent expenditures about 8.7 trillion naira. So for the first time we have that. But the challenge will be the government ability to raise the funding required, which is the second part of the question. We have the funding to meet this projected expenditure. And that's always the cross of our budget implementation. If you look at the current 2023 budget, As at the end of September, government has spent about 12.7 trillion naira. And at the same time, government had only been able to raise just about 8.65 trillion naira, leaving a deficit of about 4 trillion naira as of September. If you look at current year's budget, that is 2024 budget, the projections, some of the projections on which the revenue expectation is built on might be tall to difficult to achieve. For instance, we have a projected 1.78 million barrels of crude per day. That might be a tall call, given the level of crude production today. I mean, in November, the crude production was about 1.24 million barrels a day. So we have to grow that by almost 500,000 barrels, by more than 550,000 barrels a day. That's one factor. The other factor is the crude price. The projection is about $77.9 per barrel. Today, Brent crude is struggling to achieve that price level. And we know what's going on in OPEC and OPEC Plus. We know Angola has exited OPEC. So if care is not taken, you could have a price war that could lead to a decline in crude prices in the new year. Those are the two challenges in terms of revenue projection that could be a tall order to achieve. But because the achievement of the revenue projection, the expenditure projection is dependent on ability to achieve the revenue projections. Remember that debt service, which is projected at about 8.127 trillion naira, is what you call non-discretionary. We must pay interest to those who are borrowed money from. Non-debt equivalent expenditure is also largely non-discretionary. You're talking of salaries of government workers and other overhead. So about 17 trillion naira is non-discretionary. And that simply means our revenue must be at least 17 trillion naira.
Talking about the debt service, Mr. Chukwu, I wanted to, consider the securitization of the 7.3 trillion naira Ways and Means debt, and the talk about how this can help us reduce the debt service for this year. Are you quite optimistic about that?
Yes, of course. The securitizing the Ways and Means will reduce, because prior to the securitization, the federal government pays interest at MPR plus 2 or 3%. So MPR today is 18.75%. If you are paying interest at MPR plus 2, then you're talking about 21% interest rate that the government was paying. The lending, when it is securitized, is about 9%. So you have a savings of more than 12% in terms of interest expense. So clearly, that will reduce the interest obligation. But we must sound a note of warning to the government, or a cautious advice to the government. The government should not continue to borrow from the central bank on the assumption that it will always securitize it. If you look at the 7.2 trillion that's being securitized, like I said, the 4 trillion deficit we had as of September was fully borrowed from central bank as Ways and Means, which means between October and December, we borrowed another 3.2 trillion naira, which is now why we're now securitizing about 7.2 trillion naira. And the challenge is that if we continue to borrow from the central bank, hoping that we securitize and pay lower interest, it defeats the Central Bank Act and it defeats the Fiscal Responsibility Act.
How much emphasis would you say this year's spending plan is, paying on non-oil revenue generation?
Well, if you look at the budget projections, the revenue projections, the greater part of the income is going to come from non-oil revenue. You have taxes, you have withholding taxes. Of course, withholding taxes largely goes to the state and local government. But you have principally from income from government-owned enterprises and other government income-generating enterprise parastatals like MPA, like customs. A lot of income will come from customs and excise duties. A lot will come from the likes of MPA. So you have surplus coming from these agencies. And then you have income from the Federal Inland Revenue Taxes, Federal Revenue Board, FIRS taxes, corporate income tax, petroleum income tax. So a large chunk of the income will come from these components of government projected revenue.
Chief Executive Officer, Cowry Asset, Johnson Chukwu, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you, and same wishes.
Coming up on TVC News at 1. First Lady Senator Olurebi Tinubu, state governments celebrate first babies of the year 2024. That's after this break.